Dr. Marcus Lewis stepped into the faculty lounge, a space that radiated a blend of knowledge and unspoken hierarchies. The walls were lined with shelves crammed with textbooks and research journals, but it was the atmosphere that weighed heavily on him. As he crossed the threshold, a familiar knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. He had spent countless hours crafting his research proposal, a study on the nuances of racial dynamics in education. Yet here he was, on the precipice of yet another encounter that threatened to undermine his hard work. The room was bustling with chatter, faculty members clustered in small groups, sipping coffee and exchanging ideas. He spotted Professor Smith, a man known for his condescending demeanor, standing with a few colleagues. The moment they noticed Marcus, he felt the shift in energy. Smith shot him a smirk, the kind that suggested he was about to be the butt of a joke. "Good morning, Marcus," Smith called out, his voice dripping with feigned friendliness. "Are you still working on that research project of yours? I thought you finished it months ago." Laughter erupted from his companions, a chorus of dismissive chuckles that echoed in Marcus's ears. "Actually, I'm preparing for the presentation next week," Marcus replied, forcing a smile. He knew he had to maintain his composure, but the sting of their ridicule settled deep within him. "I believe the findings will provide valuable insights into educational inequality." "Is that so?" Smith replied, his eyebrows raised incredulously. "I must have missed the memo. What makes you think anyone will take it seriously? After all, you're just a graduate student, right?" Marcus's heart raced. The dismissive remarks cut deeper than any blade could. He had earned his position as an assistant professor through years of hard work and perseverance. Yet here he stood, treated as if he were still on the fringes of academia. "Professor Smith, I assure you that my qualifications are in line with the department's standards," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. He turned away, knowing that engaging further would only fuel the fire of their mockery. He felt the weight of their doubt pressing down on him as he made his way to a quieter corner of the lounge. Later, in a tense faculty meeting, Marcus presented his findings with a passion that he hoped would resonate. The room was filled with colleagues, some attentive, others distracted. As he spoke, he could feel the skepticism radiating from the back row, where Smith sat with a smirk plastered on his face. Marcus concluded his presentation, feeling a mix of adrenaline and dread. As the meeting adjourned, he overheard the whispers that sliced through the air like shards of glass. "Can you believe he thinks he can change anything?" one voice said. "What credentials does he even have?" another chimed in. The whispers stung, and Marcus felt the weight of their doubt settle heavily on his shoulders. He stepped outside, seeking solace in the crisp air. It was then that he spotted Elena, a determined student who had been his staunchest supporter since the beginning of his journey. She approached him, her brow furrowed with concern. "Marcus, don't let them get to you," she urged, her voice unwavering. "Your research is important. You're making a difference. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it," he confessed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle against a tide of prejudice." Elena looked him in the eye, her expression fierce. "You have to believe in yourself. You're not just a student. You're a pioneer in your field. Your work matters, and I believe in you." Her words ignited a flicker of hope within him. Marcus nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. As they walked together, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He couldn't let the doubts of others extinguish the fire that burned within him. Later that evening, Marcus found himself standing outside the classroom, heart pounding at the thought of confronting Professor Smith. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, ready to assert his place among his colleagues. As Smith exited the class, Marcus stepped forward. "Professor Smith, can we talk?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Smith turned, the smirk fading into a look of indifference. "What is it, Marcus?" "I'm quite busy. I need to address some of the comments you made earlier," Marcus began, but Smith waved him off, his demeanor dismissive. "Really, Marcus? You're making a fuss over nothing. Let's not waste each other's time." With that, he brushed past Marcus, leaving him standing there, frustration boiling beneath the surface. As Marcus watched Smith walk away, he felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. Was this how it would always be? Would he be forever trapped in a cycle of doubt and dismissal? He took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was just the beginning. He had come too far to turn back now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the campus, Dr. Marcus Lewis sat hunched over his desk in the cluttered office that had become both his sanctuary and battleground. The walls were plastered with academic papers and research articles, and the worn-out chair creaked beneath him as he scrolled through his latest findings. He had stumbled upon a troubling pattern in academic literature, an alarming prevalence of racial bias that skewed research outcomes and perpetuated stereotypes. "Marcus, you've got to see this," he said aloud, as if the words could conjure his steadfast student, Elena. He had been poring over data for hours, and his excitement was palpable. The door creaked open, and Elena, with her bright smile and determined eyes, entered the room. "What's got you so animated?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I found evidence of systemic bias in the way racial dynamics are portrayed in educational research," Marcus replied, his voice lifting with each word. "It's worse than I imagined. We need to publish this immediately." Elena's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Absolutely. This could change how people understand these dynamics. We have to get it out there. Do you really think people will listen?" Marcus's voice wavered, a hint of doubt creeping in. "Listen? They'll have no choice," Elena asserted, stepping forward to lean over the desk and study the graphs he had meticulously compiled. "This is groundbreaking. We can't let your findings gather dust like your colleagues would prefer." Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of hope. "You're right. We need to prepare a draft for submission. I just wish I didn't feel so isolated in this department. It's as if every step forward is met with 2 steps back." "Let's show them what we're made of," Elena encouraged. "I'll help you with the writing. We'll make it shine." As they began to outline the paper, the door swung open again, this time revealing Professor Smith, flanked by 2 other faculty members. The trio's laughter faded as they caught sight of Marcus and Elena, their expressions shifting to condescension. "Ah, Dr. Lewis," Smith began, his tone dripping with mockery. "I see you're still playing with your little research project. How charming." Marcus's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. "I'm working on something significant, Professor. I believe it could contribute to the field." "Significant?" Smith scoffed. "I'm sure it's cute. You know, some of us have actual research to conduct." He exchanged knowing glances with his companions, who smirked. Elena's face flushed with indignation. "Dr. Lewis is doing groundbreaking work? You wouldn't know because you refuse to acknowledge anything outside your narrow view." Smith's eyes narrowed, but he merely waved her off, turning to leave. "Good luck with your research, Marcus. I hope it's as impressive as you think it is." As the door closed behind them, Elena turned to Marcus, her expression a mix of anger and determination. "Don't let them get to you. They're scared of what you're uncovering. You have to keep pushing forward." "I know," Marcus replied, though the weight of Smith's words lingered. "It's just hard to shake the feeling that I'm fighting a losing battle." "Then let's rally support. I can talk to some of the other students. We can show them that you're not alone in this," Elena declared, her resolve solidifying. As the days passed, Marcus found himself growing more isolated. He noticed colleagues whispering in corners, their eyes darting toward him as he walked past. It felt as if an invisible wall had been erected, separating him from the very people with whom he once hoped to collaborate. Yet, in this darkness, Elena became a beacon of light. She organized a group of students who believed in Marcus's work, encouraging them to attend his upcoming lecture on racial dynamics in education. "Just wait until they see the turnout," she said one afternoon, her voice filled with hope. "You'll show them that people care about this issue." "Thanks, Elena," Marcus replied, feeling a warmth in his chest. "It means more than you know." The day of the lecture arrived, and despite the tension that hung in the air, Marcus stepped onto the stage with a renewed sense of purpose. He delivered his findings with passion, each statistic resonating with the audience. The applause that followed felt like a small victory, but it was short-lived. Later that evening, as Marcus sat at his desk, he received an anonymous email that made his blood run cold. The screen glowed with harsh, derogatory comments about his work, questioning his intellect and capabilities. Anger surged through him, but alongside it was a fierce determination. "Not this time," he muttered to himself, clenching his fists. "I will prove them wrong." With renewed vigor, he turned back to his research, ready to fight against the barriers that sought to hold him down. Marcus sat at his cluttered desk, staring at the rejection email from the prestigious journal. The words felt like daggers, piercing through his hopes and dreams. Despite the sting, he knew he couldn't afford to wallow in disappointment. The research he had poured his heart into was important, not just for his career, but for the conversations it could ignite within academia. With a deep breath, he pushed the laptop aside and looked at Elena, who had been reviewing his work with unwavering enthusiasm. "Marcus, don't let this get to you," she said, her voice steady. "Every great researcher faces setbacks. Remember the feedback we discussed? Let's use it to make your paper even stronger." Marcus nodded, grateful for her presence. "You're right. I thought this time would be different. I thought they would finally see the value in what I'm doing." Elena leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with conviction. "They will, Marcus. We just need to show them. Let's refine your arguments and strengthen your data. This is just a stepping stone." The next few days saw Marcus and Elena working tirelessly in the university library. They sifted through stacks of articles, gathering evidence and refining methodologies. Marcus shared anecdotes and observations from his own experiences, and Elena took notes, crafting powerful narratives that illustrated the importance of his work. As the faculty meeting approached, a mix of determination and anxiety churned in Marcus's stomach. He spent late nights preparing his presentation, practicing in front of a mirror, trying to anticipate questions and challenges. He knew Professor Smith would be watching closely, ready to pounce on any perceived weakness. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Faculty members settled into their seats, whispering among themselves. Marcus could feel their skepticism like a weight pressing down on him. But as he stepped up to the podium, he straightened his back and took a deep breath, channeling the support from Elena and the few colleagues who believed in him. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus began, his voice steady. "Today, I will present my revised research on racial dynamics in education. I believe it's crucial for us to examine how systemic biases affect our academic structures and the students we serve." As he spoke, he could see some heads nodding, while others remained unmoved. He highlighted key findings, showing how his data illuminated the stark disparities that often went unnoticed. The room was silent, and for a moment, he felt a surge of hope. Then, just as he anticipated, Professor Smith raised his hand, his expression one of disbelief. "Dr. Lewis, with all due respect, your research seems to lack the rigor we expect from submissions to this department. How can you expect us to take these claims seriously when they are based on such subjective observations?" The challenge hung in the air, and Marcus felt his heart race. He had expected this, but it was still disheartening. "Professor Smith, if I may respond," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "The experiences I've shared are not merely subjective. They are backed by extensive quantitative data and qualitative interviews from students across diverse backgrounds." Smith's lips curled into a smirk. "But anecdotal evidence is hardly enough to support such sweeping conclusions. One must wonder whether your own biases are clouding your judgment." Marcus could feel the tension in the room shift. Colleagues began whispering again, their skepticism resurfacing. But he refused to back down. "If I may add," he continued, "the data shows a clear pattern of systemic bias. It's not just my perspective. It's a reality that many students face daily. Ignoring it only perpetuates the cycle of injustice." The meeting room buzzed with murmured conversations. Marcus could sense that some faculty members were beginning to reconsider their positions. But Smith was relentless. "And how do you propose we address these biases without compromising academic standards?" "By acknowledging the problem first," Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength. "Only by bringing these issues into the light can we begin to address them. It's our responsibility as educators to create an environment where every student feels valued and understood." As he concluded, he noticed a few nods of agreement, but Smith's glare remained fixed on him, a storm brewing in his eyes. The tension was palpable, and Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had stood his ground, but the battle was far from over. The meeting ended with a mixture of applause and uncertainty, leaving Marcus to wonder if his efforts had truly made an impact or if the barriers he faced were too ingrained to break. After the faculty meeting, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at his computer screen, the dim light casting shadows on the walls. The weight of his colleagues' skepticism hung heavily in the air. Just as he was about to close his laptop, a notification pinged. An email popped up from Dr. Taylor, a renowned scholar whose work Marcus had long admired. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I've been following your research on racial dynamics in education, and I would like to discuss a potential collaboration. Your insights are timely, and I believe we could produce something groundbreaking together." Marcus felt a surge of hope. He read the email again, almost in disbelief. "This is it," he whispered to himself, a smile breaking across his face. He quickly typed a response, expressing his eagerness to collaborate. The renewed sense of purpose invigorated him. Perhaps he could still make a significant impact despite the challenges he faced. Later that day, Marcus met with Elena in the university cafe, a cozy nook filled with the aroma of roasted coffee beans and chatter. She looked up from her notes, her eyes lighting up when she noticed his animated expression. "What's got you smiling like that?" she asked, taking a sip of her cappuccino. "I received an email from Dr. Taylor," Marcus exclaimed, barely able to contain his excitement. "He wants to collaborate on a research project." Elena's face broke into a wide grin. "That's fantastic news. You've been working so hard. This is your breakthrough." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of their shared struggles lighten just a little. "I think this could really change things for me. Maybe even for us." "Let's not waste time then," she said, her determination palpable. "We should organize a seminar. You can share your findings and attract more support." The idea sparked a fire in Marcus. "Yes, we can focus on the racial dynamics in education and how they impact student outcomes. We need to get more people talking about this," he replied, his mind racing with possibilities. Over the next week, they worked tirelessly, crafting the seminar's agenda and reaching out to potential speakers. The buzz began to spread, and they were surprised by the level of interest from both students and faculty. On the day of the seminar, the room was packed, vibrant with a diverse audience eager to engage in dialogue. Marcus stood at the podium, a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through him. As he glanced around the room, he spotted familiar faces, supportive students, interested faculty, and even some who had previously doubted him. "Thank you all for being here today," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "We're here to discuss the impact of racial dynamics in education and how they shape our understanding of equity in academia." As he spoke, he felt the energy of the room shift. Questions poured in from the audience, each one igniting a new thread of conversation. Elena watched proudly from the side, witnessing the transformation of her mentor before her eyes. Later, as the seminar concluded and applause filled the room, Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. He had successfully conveyed his message, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. "Marcus, that was incredible," Elena said, joining him as attendees began to disperse. "You really captivated everyone." "Thanks, Elena. I couldn't have done it without your support," he replied, his heart swelling with gratitude. "This feels like a turning point." But even as they celebrated, a shadow loomed. Professor Smith had been notably absent from the seminar, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was still plotting against him. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Smith had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes, sowing seeds of doubt among the administration. In the days that followed, Marcus received numerous emails from those who had attended the seminar, praising his work and expressing interest in further discussions. Yet, there was one email that stood out, a stern message from the administration, hinting at concerns raised regarding the validity of his research. "Marcus, we need to talk," Elena said one afternoon, her expression serious as they met in the library. She had just received word about Smith's clandestine efforts to undermine him. "I overheard some faculty discussing your work. There's talk of a formal review." "What? Why?" His heart sank. "I thought today was a step in the right direction." "I know. But Smith is still out there, and he's not giving up, Elena warned, her eyes narrowing with determination. We need to prepare for whatever he's planning. With a heavy heart, Marcus knew that their battle was far from over. But he also felt a flicker of resilience igniting within him. He had the support of his students and Dr. Taylor's promise of collaboration. Together, they would navigate these treacherous waters, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The tension hung thick in the air as Dr. Marcus Lewis sat at his desk, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside his office. He meticulously reviewed his slides for the upcoming conference, the culmination of months of hard work. His research had the potential to redefine the understanding of racial dynamics in education, but unbeknownst to him, Professor Smith was weaving a web of deceit that threatened to unravel everything he had achieved. As Marcus adjusted his tie in the mirror, his phone buzzed. It was Elena, his steadfast student and ally. "Hey, Dr. Lewis, are you ready for the conference? I can't wait to see you present." Her enthusiasm radiated through the screen, and Marcus felt a surge of confidence. "Thanks, Elena. I'm just going over a few last details. I hope to make an impact today," he replied, a slight smile breaking through the stress of the moment. "You will. Just remember why you started this journey," she encouraged. "You've got this." With a deep breath, Marcus left his office and made his way to the conference hall, where faculty, students, and scholars mingled. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, and Marcus felt a flicker of hope. This was his moment. But as he stepped onto the stage, he noticed Smith lurking at the back, a sardonic smile on his face that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. The presentation began, and Marcus spoke passionately about his findings, weaving together statistics and personal stories that illustrated the systemic biases in education. The audience was engaged, nodding along, their expressions encouraging. He could feel the energy shift in the room, a collective acknowledgement of the importance of his work. However, as he concluded, Smith stood up, a smug expression on his face. "Dr. Lewis, while your presentation was compelling, I must raise a point of concern. I've received reports suggesting that your data may not accurately reflect the reality of our academic environment. Are you sure you haven't misrepresented your findings?" His voice dripped with condescension, and murmurs rippled through the audience. Marcus's heart raced. "Professor Smith, my data is meticulously gathered and peer-reviewed. I stand by my research," he asserted, trying to maintain his composure. "Is that so? Perhaps the administration should take a closer look at your methodology," Smith retorted, smirking as he glanced at a few faculty members who were nodding in agreement. The air thickened with tension, and Marcus felt a wave of doubt wash over him. He could see the flicker of uncertainty in some of his colleagues' eyes. Just as he was about to respond, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Elena charged forward, her face flushed with determination. "Excuse me, but I believe there's something you all need to hear," she announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I've been working closely with Dr. Lewis, and I have evidence that suggests Professor Smith has been manipulating data and planting seeds of doubt about his work. This isn't just a personal attack. It's a systematic attempt to undermine him." The room fell silent as Elena pulled out printed emails and documents, spreading them across the table. These are communications where Smith has attempted to discredit Dr. Lewis's research and qualifications. This isn't just about academic disagreement. It's about bias and racism within our institution. Gasps erupted from the audience, and Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for Elena's bravery. Smith's face flushed with anger, and he attempted to regain control. "That's absurd. You're just a student. You don't understand the complexities of this field." Elena stood firm. "I understand enough to see when someone is trying to sabotage another's career. This is not just about one person's research. It's about the integrity of our academic community. We need to stand together against this kind of manipulation." The murmurs grew louder as faculty members exchanged glances, the tide shifting in Marcus's favor. He stood a little taller, emboldened by Elena's support. "Thank you, Elena. It's imperative that we address the issues of bias, not only in research but also within our academic practices. We cannot allow fear and prejudice to dictate our discourse." As the meeting continued, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but with allies like Elena, he knew they could confront the challenges ahead. The seeds of change had been planted, and for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps the barriers he faced could finally begin to crumble. Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie with a firm determination. The weight of the past weeks hung heavy on his shoulders, but today was different. Today, he would confront Professor Smith, not just for himself, but for every scholar of color who had faced similar prejudices. He gathered the files he had painstakingly compiled, filled with evidence of Smith's history of undermining minority faculty. As he walked toward the faculty meeting room, he could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. When Marcus entered the room, a palpable tension filled the air. Colleagues whispered among themselves, some casting furtive glances his way. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he was no longer that uncertain professor struggling beneath the weight of others' doubts. Today, he was armed with the truth. "Thank you all for being here," the department chair began, a hint of apprehension creeping into his voice. "We're here to discuss the ongoing investigation concerning Dr. Lewis and Professor Smith." As the chair spoke, Marcus noticed Smith sitting at the far end of the table, his expression a mix of arrogance and disdain. Marcus's heart raced, but he focused on the task ahead. "If I may," he interrupted, his voice steady, "I would like to present some findings of my own." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Marcus. He opened his folder, revealing documents that detailed Smith's previous actions, emails, testimonies from other faculty members, and records of past incidents where he had attempted to discredit minority colleagues. For years, Professor Smith has engaged in a pattern of behavior that undermines the work and credibility of minority faculty in this department, Marcus stated, his voice rising with passion. "That's a serious accusation, Marcus," Smith sneered, leaning back in his chair with a dismissive wave of his hand. "What evidence do you have that it's anything more than your own paranoia?" "Paranoia?" Marcus echoed incredulously, flipping to a page of documented evidence. "How about this email from 2018, where you questioned the qualifications of Dr. Rivera, who happens to be one of the most respected scholars in her field?" He glanced around the room, noting the widening eyes of his colleagues as they absorbed the implications of his words. "I'm sure you're misinterpreting the context," Smith shot back, but his voice lacked the confidence it once had. "No, Professor Smith," Marcus replied, his tone firm. "The context is clear. You have a history of targeting those who challenge your authority. And that's exactly what I intend to challenge today." An uneasy murmur rippled through the room, as faculty members exchanged looks of disbelief. Marcus continued, detailing the pattern of bias he had uncovered in his research. "This isn't just about me. This is about creating an academic environment where all voices can be heard and no one is silenced due to the color of their skin." As he spoke, Elena sat in the back, her heart swelling with pride. She had witnessed Marcus's journey from self-doubt to this moment of fierce advocacy. The realization that he was not just fighting for himself, but for so many others, filled her with hope. After Marcus concluded his presentation, the chair looked visibly shaken. "Thank you, Dr. Lewis. We will take this evidence into consideration." As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. But the final blow came when the chair announced, "In light of these findings, we will be conducting a thorough review of Professor Smith's conduct." Smith's face paled, and for a moment he looked genuinely afraid. It was a stark contrast to his earlier bravado. "This is slander," he shouted, but no one seemed to pay him any mind. Later, as Marcus stepped out of the meeting room, he was met by a wave of congratulations from colleagues who had previously kept their distance. They offered words of support, and for the first time, he felt the barriers that had once isolated him beginning to crumble. Elena rushed to his side, her eyes shining with admiration. "You did it, Marcus. You stood your ground and fought back." "I couldn't have done it without you, Elena," he replied, a smile breaking through the tension of the day. "We did this together." As the administration took swift action against Smith in the following days, Marcus's research was finally recognized and published. The accolades poured in, and with them, a sense of vindication. Standing in the university courtyard, surrounded by supportive colleagues and students, Marcus looked at Elena. They shared a moment of understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of the barriers they had faced and the change they had ignited. Change was possible, and together, they had begun to forge a new path for future scholars.